All right, what's going on, everyone? It's Sean with another Tesla video, taking a little bit of a different angle on this one. We're going live, which is something that we did for the Hypermile Challenge over the weekend. Saw it worked well, so we're going to go for it again. And I've got a special guest, Gali from HyperChange TV. You may recognize the name because he actually was one of the callers on Tesla's last investor phone call, representing the average Joe investor, which is fantastic. So Gali, thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean.
So I'm really interested to jump into like maybe some of the basics for those that have never heard of you. They've been living under a rock the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks since the earnings call that you were on and actually asked Elon Musk direct questions about Tesla and profitability. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a 25-year-old entrepreneur living in New York City, and I have a YouTube channel and a newsletter that's called HyperChange, and the goal is sort of like finance news for millennials. So I've been investing for 10 years. I love stocks. Tesla is the only stock I own right now, actually. So super into Tesla, and my channel and newsletter is sort of dedicated to analyzing the company from the financial perspective.
Now, this is not just Tesla, though, that you add commentary on, because I've seen you talk about some other companies as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so HyperChange is sort of my umbrella term for like disruptive tech innovation, and that's like my interest. And so Tesla is obviously right under that umbrella, but there's other things like crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm investors in those, so I like to talk about those. You know, companies like Amazon, Snapchat. So sort of anything in this like tech universe, but also with the lens of like sustainability. That's super important to me. And so that's why Tesla is sort of like a convergence of all my interests of, you know, like incredibly disruptive company, like awesome financials to analyze, also making things more sustainable. And so that's sort of why I cover them the most.
Love it. Love it. Catch people up on the last 3 weeks. I'm sure 3-4 weeks have been pretty nutty for you. So talk through the timeline of how you got on the quarterly earnings call for Tesla and what that was like, maybe some of the things that you covered and asked Elon Musk.
Totally. So I always make videos like recapping Tesla's quarterly earnings call. So for those, I don't know who is familiar with this, but every quarter, every company hosts a conference call open to analysts to ask questions about their quarterly financials. And so I always make videos recapping these for Tesla because a ton of new information is revealed. One of my subscribers was like, hey, like you should try and get on these calls and ask a question. So I set up a campaign and like put out a video. As basically like, hey guys, like let's try and do this. I want to crowdsource questions on the call, not just have it be bankers. And I thought there was no chance it would work. But then like 200 people emailed representing over 20 million of shares. I tweeted to Elon about it and he was like, okay, we'll have you on the call. And so that's kind of how it came about. And then on the call, discussed a ton of different stuff. First, like the autopilot, the Tesla network, you know, what they're thinking about the time frame for launching their sort of robot taxi service, a bunch of stuff around the supercharger network and why, you know, they've decided to try and open it up to other automakers versus keeping it closed. We also talked about the battery side of the company as well and how that big battery in South Australia is kind of adding to the momentum there. So
yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I guess I've always thought this in my head about the earnings call, but they've always been kind of really, really boring. Like really, I guess you learn some new things, but they've always been really boring. And so when you came on and I was actually listening to the earnings call live when this happened, all of a sudden it kind of seemed like it picked up a tempo as far as information and energy. What were you thinking when they called on your name and you went live with Elon Musk?
Yeah, wait, sorry, you cut out on the last part of the question there.
What were you thinking that moment that you went live with questions to Elon Musk?
Well, like luckily I was plugged in like the control system, like ready to answer a question. So I wasn't expecting to be dialed in that early, but I like had my notes like right there. And so I had sort of verbatim because I was like a little bit in shock, like, oh my God, I'm talking to Elon Musk right now, like holy shit. But Yeah, it was a kind of a surreal moment, but like luckily I had talked to actually a ton of different like Tesla bloggers and YouTubers, like the Tesla podcast, Fred from Electrek, and like we had really coordinated a bunch of questions from the subscribers. So I was like super prepared with notes, and so I think that made it a lot easier to like make it a productive Q&A.
Yeah, you sounded very poised when asking the questions, and they were very well thought through questions. And not only that, but I think they were things that hadn't been asked to Tesla in a while or ever.
Yeah, that was the goal.
Yeah, so a lot of really good information I think that was uncovered. So um, let's kind of dive into the meat of the interview, which is, can Tesla become profitable in 2018? So maybe that's kind of the driving topic for the rest of our talk, but maybe let's kind of break it down to some bite sizes. Like, what does Tesla need to do in order to become profitable in 2018?
Yeah. So even taking a step back beyond that, like Tesla loses money, significant amounts of money up until now. They're not profitable. And that's because they've been building out the infrastructure to sell millions of cars per year, but they're only selling 100,000 now. So I think of them as sort of like in startup mode is what I
Yeah.
would say. You know, they're growing incredibly rapidly, but losing money. And 2018 is very interesting because they've said, okay, now we're going to go profitable. They're hitting that inflection point where they're big enough and they can start to actually make money. And so the real way that actually happens is the first way I think about this is their operating expenses, which is like the stores they built, and their R&D expenses are relatively flat or growing very slowly. Because if you think about it, they built out all their stores already. Now that they have the Model 3, they can just put that in their existing stores. And all of a sudden, those stores are vastly more productive because they have the S, X, and now the 3. And so that is one component I look at about it. And the second component is like, if they can sell a ton more Model 3s, how many Model 3s they can sell and at what margin will dictate how much excess profit can come to the bottom line. So really it's all about how fast, and this is why the media is all over, you know, how fast they're scaling Model 3, because they need to hit, according to them, 5,000 units per week, and then they will be profitable. And that is assuming margins around 20%. They've said 25% gross margins in the long term. And so those are the kind of the three drivers I'm looking for: Model 3 deliveries, Model 3 margin, and operating expenses.
So it sounds like, just as I follow the production levels loosely of the Model 3, they're well on their way to 5K a week, right? I mean, it seems like I follow the VIN registrations on Twitter, and I mean, they're, I think, above 50,000 registered VINs. So though that's not a true kind of apples to apples tell of how much they're producing a week, it is kind of a pulse on productivity. So do you think they've hit the 5,000, or is that coming up very, very soon?
It's interesting to see they've kind of been doing, this is just total guesstimating, by the way, trying to analyze, like sort of like big bursts. Well, they'll ramp up production,
Yeah.
shut it down for a couple days, tweak, either add new tooling, and then when they revamp production, it's significantly higher. So I believe the last burst production, according to my like analysis, was around 3,000 or 3,500 per week. And now I think they've shut it down for a couple days or slowing down production to install some new equipment. And I think that will get them, you know, over 4,000, eventually very close to 5,000. But I also think people get way too caught up in this, like, when are they going to hit 5,000? They're at 4,000 now. Is it going to be next month, et cetera? And you know, I take a step back, and I'm like, how many cars is Tesla delivering each year? And if you look at that chart, like the growth is just phenomenal like this. And, you know, 5,000 Model 3s a week is equivalent to like 250,000 a year. Tesla only delivered 100,000 cars all of last year. So I just think it's super important to put things in context, like how fast they're growing. So I don't think they're quite at 5,000 yet, to answer your question, but I think they're getting there quickly, and the progress they've made has been phenomenal.
I agree. I think the incremental growth on production numbers as a whole with all three of their cars is looking very healthy up and to the right. And especially with the Model 3, when you factor the number of cars that they're pushing out into the customer's hands, it looks very, very encouraging to know that they will surpass both S and X production numbers just with the Model 3 here very soon if they haven't already.
Yeah, totally.
So we've got production numbers, we've got margins. So you had said that the 20%. Are we talking about all three cars or just the Model 3 for 20% gross or profit margin?
Model 3. Although Tesla has said in the long term they want to hit 25%.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that'll be sometime this year or not. That's why I think 20% is a more conservative number to use.
It makes a lot of sense as to why they are rolling out with all-wheel drive and performance. Then, if they want that gross margin, profit margin to be as large as possible, it makes sense that they would not only offer the premium long range, but also offer some of those higher margin offerings for the Model 3. Is that kind of your sentiment as well?
Yeah, and I have 2 points here. The first point is like I'm a little bit bummed that Tesla didn't just like stick to a hard rule of like the first person in line gets their car no matter what options, because I think that would have been a more ethical way to do it. But I guess financially that's too tricky. And I think the other big, like, there's a huge misconception about like I've been reading all this stuff like, oh, it's the $78,000 Model 3. It's not a $35,000 car. No one will be like, and I just think like every single car has options, and this is the standard for the industry. And so I think, Tesla is doing what every other automaker does and launching these premium options and models. And it makes sense financially to deliver those first. But I just think I would feel bummed if I waited there day one and like now I see the guy who ordered way after me getting his car first because he's paying more. But
right. Yeah, I would probably be frustrated as well if I was waiting for a $35,000 Model 3 and, Tesla's prioritizing the people who are willing to essentially pay more for their car to get it first. Mm-hmm. But when the ultimate goal for Tesla is to be profitable, and to get this Model 3 ramp off the ground so that they can increase the production numbers, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I'd rather have a profitable, healthy financial company that can sustain long-term growth than sell cars where they're taking a hit on that profit margin just to get people the less expensive car.
Totally. And Tesla's a mission-driven company, so their entire philosophy is like, we're transitioning the world off fossil fuels. And I think that's why I kind of give them leeway, because they're trying to get that mission accomplished. And if that means waiting a little bit more for your cheaper Model 3, I think customers are, unlike every other auto company or many other brands, are very understanding. And this is another interesting part of why I'm so into Teslas, because I think there's a why behind the brand. Like, why are you buying these products? Every time you buy a Tesla product, you're investing in this entity that is like destroying the fossil fuel complex. And I think that is a super, super powerful sort of incentive. And that's why I don't think the 35,000 people will cancel. I think they'll just wait longer, and they're very understanding of Tesla trying to accomplish its mission.
I hope so. I really do hope so. I mean, I've seen a few people say that they couldn't wait any longer, and they've gotten into, they either bought another car or they've gotten into a lease. I mean, if you're outside of the U.S., outside of North America, it's probably going to be a couple of years anyway before you get the Model 3. But hopefully, a lot of people who have reservations will keep those reservations and hang tight while they wait for the Model 3. Yeah, I also see a lot of people buying Model S's, giving up their Model 3 reservation for a Model S.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if that's wide scale, but I mean, I can speak to several owners here in the Denver area who just wanted to be in a Tesla, and so they bought the 75D, which is pretty close. You're talking about $10,000-$15,000 difference between current Model 3 offering and the base Model S.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what are some of the other factors in this road to profitability? And let's just kind of start there. Like what are some of the other factors that need to fall into place for Tesla?
I mean, I think the biggest factor is literally Model 3. And this is kind of like, it's kind of almost just simple. It's like, how many Model 3s can they deliver and at what margin? And that will dictate everything. And so I think that's why on the call, when you heard Elon Musk, some people were asking about the Semi, the Model Y, like you can tell, like those are going to be amazing products and I'm excited for them. But you can tell his head is like, screw it. I've had enough with the media. I've had enough with like people saying we can't do it and like people waiting for their cars. This is the make or break product for Tesla. Like we need to ramp deliveries, do it profitably. And like, that's the inflection point. And why that's so important is because Tesla's business model, like building car factories is very expensive. They have to raise money from, you know, investors or sell debt to be able to fund these new factories. But if their core business is producing cash flow with the Model 3, they can use that cash flow to build their factories and not rely on the outside markets. And so that would be the biggest change in Tesla's business model since they IPO'd, would be not relying on the capital markets. And so just bringing it back to your question, I think it's all about Model 3. Like literally the only thing that matters right now is how many Model 3s they can build and what the profit margin is on those.
So when I look at this from a business perspective, as an entrepreneur, and I know this kind of makes sense to you, when I'm looking at my real estate business, I look at, you know, when I want to grow it, where's the path of least resistance? And when I look at it through the lens of Tesla, that's sort of the thing that makes sense to me when you talk about Model 3 being the thing that will get Tesla to where they want to be in the path of least resistance, because they've got, let's say, 400,000 to 500,000 reservations for the Model 3. If they can just work this out, then it's really a cash cow. This car will be a cash cow for Tesla, because they know that there's, you know, almost 500,000 people that are clamoring to get into this car.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great problem to have. I can't think of another company that has $20 billion worth of orders that they can't fulfill. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I love companies where their biggest problem is literally so many people want to buy their product that they can't build it fast enough. That's a good problem to have, you know?
Absolutely. And that's what doesn't concern me about what Tesla's doing right now, because they have demand. You know, a company who struggles to make a profit but is not selling products, they're in trouble. Right, but Tesla's not in that situation. They have strong demand. They're the Apple of automobiles. People clamor for them. They stand in line for ungodly hours just to get their hands on a Tesla.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of the Apple analogy, because I think it couldn't be more accurate. So
what do you think it is, just to kind of riff off of that topic there? What is it about Tesla that you think makes people clamor for their product?
They have done they've simultaneously made the cars cooler and more sustainable. So I think it's like this really, and that's why electric cars have never clicked, because now like their performance better, they're faster, they look better, and you're making a statement about your ethics when you buy Tesla. So I think that is like an unbelievably powerful brand that they built. And then also their whole thing about, like, to the Apple analogy, their stores are very, very Apple-esque. It's a retail distribution model that no other auto company has. It was actually designed by George Blankenship, who designed Apple's retail stores. So there's a lot of similarities there. And I also think for EVs, that makes a huge difference, because you're educating consumers about something that they've never bought before. It's a totally new technology of how it works. So I think having these stores and like being able to be the touch point with the consumer directly is also like a huge Apple-esque part of their model.
I've recently, over the last couple of weeks, spent a lot of time with the Model 3. What's your perception of what people think? You know, people that are taking delivery of their Model 3s, since this is such a core component to Tesla becoming profitable. What do you see people? How are they reacting when they actually get their Model 3s?
I would love to hear your answer to this as well. But my guess is people love their cars. Like, a lot of the Tesla diehards love their cars, and they're like blown away with it. I've seen some really good reviews on Twitter and stuff of like how, you know, driving with the autopilot in traffic is amazing. The car looks, I personally think it looks just incredible in person. Like, when I see it parked on the street, I really like, I'm like, wow, this is like a really beautiful car. So I think that has kind of been above expectations. Jack Monroe, I think Monroe and Associates did that breakdown video about breaking down the whole Model 3. And I think he touched on something that a lot of people have complained about, which is like the panel gaps. and like, you know, just it's not fitting perfectly, but the electronics and software are eons ahead of what every other automaker is doing, while the build quality is on the lower end. And so my big takeaway from that is Tesla actually can improve significantly on the build quality. That's the easy thing. The hard thing that they've done really well with Model 3 is the software side of the vehicle. So I think I personally am in this weird boat of like where I wouldn't want to buy a Model 3 until it's been in production for a year, until they figure a lot of these problems out. But I think overall, it's been a good launch, but I think it could have been better in terms of like the panel gaps and like the braking issue that Consumer Reports mentioned. I don't know, but I'd be super, you have a Model 3, so I would love to know what you think.
Well, I don't have a Model 3. I've actually, the one that we use for the Hypermile was on loan from a very generous and kind friend. So,
okay.
But I had
one at least. I have. So
what's that?
At least you've driven one and been inside.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I've spent about 70 hours over the last. So I had a friend who took delivery of his. Maybe it was back in March, I think. He allowed me to do a video review of it, which, you know, was a probably 20 or 25-minute review back in March, if I remember correctly. So I did a full review of the car inside and out, talked about my thoughts of the car. And then over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've done 2 Hypermile attempts in a separate Model 3. Here's my thoughts about it. I think it's a phenomenal car. I think for the price, it's remarkable how well thought through it is. I mean, the exterior design, of course, is fantastic. They really knocked it out of the park with the exterior design. It looks great. You know, when you put it up next to the Model S, you can definitely tell that it's a smaller car, quite a bit smaller car. It's not only shorter, but it's also thinner, so it's not as wide as the Model S. The interior, I think, is very well thought through as well. I love the HVAC system. I think the design is very clean. Now, some people I hear don't like that minimalist approach. It's maybe they feel it's lacking a little bit, especially the screen behind the steering wheel. Yeah. For me, that has never really been an issue to have that. To not have that screen behind the steering wheel, but I think the thing that probably is in line with what your thoughts are, which is the software is just phenomenal. Like it's probably 2 or 3 times better than what the S and X have in their cars currently.
So what does that mean? Break that down for me.
Yes, what I think is remarkable, first and foremost, is that they have managed to fit what's on 2 screens in the S and the X onto one 15-inch screen. So not only is it one less screen, but it's a smaller screen than what the S and the X have. So, you know, I come from the software world, and when you try and put a lot of features on a screen, it can sometimes get cluttery. It can sometimes get clunky. But what Tesla has figured out here is slick, smooth, intuitive design all on one screen. So you don't really feel like it's overly crowded, like they tried to just cram as much into a single screen. It's well thought out. Now, can they make some improvements? I think so. But it's actually quite phenomenal how much they've actually fit on a single screen, and how easy it is to find some of those features that are maybe like 2 and 3 layers deep on that 15-inch screen.
And I want to bring up a crazy moonshot that I have, because my theory for what Tesla is setting up for Model 3 is everything will be controlled by voice, or almost everything. And that is the future they're envisioning. And potentially even, I think they should launch like an artificial intelligence assistant where you're like, maybe called Jarvis for Iron Man. And you're like, hey, Jarvis, like play this music, route me to here, get me to the newest supercharger, put on cold air. Like, so I think they're setting up for a voice first future, which is another tech trend that I'm very bullish on. And so I think that's kind of, and everything, because it's software controlled, they can do over-the-air updates to enable voice control for every single feature in the car. They left that as an open book. So I'm really interested to watch them push in that direction.
I really love that idea. I think, you know, voice is really starting to kind of take shape. I mean, you see it, you know, the case in point is Alexa. I mean, it really seems like Alexa just kind of came out of nowhere and became this dominant technology that everyone, it's just synonymous with people's lifestyle in their house. So I think you're right. I think that would be an incredibly strong play for Tesla if they can figure that out and do it well. Not like Apple Siri, but more like Alexa. It just works. You don't have to think about, you speak to it and it gets you exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm.
What's your timeline for that? If you were to like take a guess on this moonshot idea, when do you think I know Elon has talked about this too, but when do you think we might see something like that in the Teslas?
I think they'll slowly iterate and add voice functionality in more and more of the car over time. When they actually have an AI for Tesla's cars, I have no idea. Like part of me wouldn't be surprised to hear them announce it at the shareholder meeting in 2 weeks and being like, we're beta testing this AI. And part of me I wouldn't be surprised for them to not do this ever or wait till 2021. Like and the technology's there, Amazon is doing it. And I think Tesla is in kind of a unique place. It's sort of easier than a lot of things because you're in the car, like the commands are very straight. Like, it's kind of like simpler commands of like, play this music, go to here, So I think, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer on the timeline thing.
Yeah, no, I do think it's interesting. Elon has talked pretty extensively about artificial intelligence and the dark side of it. So I definitely think that it's top of mind. Part of me believes that that they're a lot further ahead in artificial intelligence than what they've shown the public. Primarily because they need AI to power autopilot and self-driving. So I think they're a lot further ahead than what they've shown the public so far. And I mean, the safe bet, it probably would be to introduce it in increments over time. But maybe the first thing is being able to talk to the car to have it navigate somewhere or open up features in the car. Yeah, I mean, you can do that to some extent already, but it's not like it's not smart. Like you couldn't give it a complex request right now in the S and the X. It wouldn't understand. It's just real basic stuff like navigate to, and then it pulls up the turn by turn coordinates on the touch screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Model 3 is obviously the road path to profitability. Let's talk about one more thing that I think is important. What are the risks that are keeping Tesla from profitability in 2018? I mean, aside from not getting to production, like what do you see some of those external risks are that maybe no one has talked about yet?
I mean, besides internal execution on Tesla's part, like some risk there where like a machine doesn't work, that's really tough for me to gauge. So I don't know. But I mean, I don't see demand going anywhere. So I don't think that's a risk. The biggest risk I see for Tesla is a recession, a global recession. If in this case, like all vehicle sales will dry up, especially premium sales, it won't be Tesla's fault. They'll still be great in market share, but they're in such a fragile financial position that a big recession would like create a lot of problems for the company. They'd be forced to raise money on somebody else's terms, dilute shareholders. A ton could go wrong with Tesla. So I think it's really important to understand from the investment perspective, like this is a startup, like you're investing in a startup that, I think there's a real possibility. I hate saying Tesla could go bankrupt and I think someone would buy them before they do, but I think it's important to understand like there's a lot of risk in this thesis. And I think the biggest thing is either they can't do what they're saying they're going to do with the Model 3, but I think they will. Tesla always comes through on that. But if a huge recession hits, then that could definitely be a problem. And they probably wouldn't get to profitability. So,
right. What are your thoughts about the press that Tesla has been receiving around drivers not paying attention while driving their cars in autopilot and getting into wrecks? Because warranted or not, and I think it's unwarranted that Tesla is getting so much press around autopilot simply because it's a headline grabber. In fact, I read a story today that from Fox News that was totally leveraging the autopilot as a headline grabber. What are your thoughts on that in line with external risks? Do you think that the press that are leveraging this autopilot, being the cause of wrecks, is a potential external risk for Tesla?
Yeah, definitely a potential external risk. And I think, I mean, it could be, it's a risk for everybody who's trying to do autonomous cars. I think this isn't just, Tesla's just kind of like the first one to put it in the wild, really. So that's why I think they're getting a lot of heat about it. And that to me is less of a risk of Tesla's like short-term selling cars, more of a risk to their long-term plans for autonomy. I don't know. I think the media, Elon has a great point about how the media spins, you know, what Tesla's doing with autopilot and how it's not like fair reporting. So I see where he's coming from there, but what he hasn't acknowledged and what I think is the biggest problem out of all of this is it's called autopilot, which means like, I don't know, when I think of that, it's like automated pilot, like someone who can do it for you. Like it's just inherent in the name that like it's driving itself. You know what I mean? And then they like kind of like play on that with the marketing. Like I think they brought this upon themselves. Like if they really made this clear, like this is a beta product, it's not driving itself. They should just change the name. I don't know. So I see where Elon's coming from, but I also think they brought this upon themselves in a lot of ways. And if it's not autopilot, then maybe don't call it autopilot. I don't know.
Do you think though, just to kind of counter that, I mean, the people who are driving Teslas right now are early adopters. They're familiar with technology. In most cases, I'm generalizing here. I'm sure there's some people that are driving them that aren't as familiar with tech. But in general, these are early adopters. They're very familiar with tech. My perception, based in reality or not, is that a lot of these incidents are not because people were confused about it being self-driving or not, but rather they're just not paying attention. They're on their phone, right? They're checking their email, they're replying to people. This is more an issue of distracted driving and putting too much trust in what the car's capabilities are.
Yeah. And no, that's a totally fair point, and that is what's happening. But I think this whole level 4 autonomy thing to me may actually be a horrible idea. And I sort of think Waymo's approach could be smart of just only level 5. Because think about the principle, like, okay, I'm driving, but the car's driving itself. My hands are kind of on the wheel. Like inherently, I should be like, it just seems like natural to pay less attention.
Yes.
And the entire principle is like, when the car can't figure it out and you're 4 seconds away from a crash, it starts beeping like, holy shit, take over, you need to do something. And then you're thrust into like, okay, I need to pay attention. I'm about to crash. Like it just puts, I don't know. That just doesn't seem like a good product to me. And like,
yeah, I think,
I don't know, I'm confused I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that.
Here's my personal take. Like right now, so I've got a like pre-autopilot Model S. So I have to have my hands on the wheel all of the time. I've driven newer Teslas that do have AP1 and AP2, and they work really well in some situations, but there's a lot of hesitancy, and I've experienced this personally, where in for some strange reason the autopilot kind of freaks out and does something that it shouldn't do. I'm not fully on board with autopilot. So if I were to put an order in for a 3 or an S or an X today, I really have wrestled, and I've wrestled with the idea of whether I should get enhanced autopilot. And we're not talking about the full self-driving package, but enhanced autopilot. I would rather be full hands on the wheel and just leverage cruise control, adaptive cruise control, than get too comfortable with where autopilot is right this very second. Now, Tesla could introduce a software update tomorrow that makes enhanced autopilot 50 times better than it is right now. And then maybe I would reconsider it, but I've really wrestled with the idea of when I put in an order for another Tesla, which I think will be very soon and sometime this year, do I really want enhanced autopilot when I'm seeing, and this is more personal thing, like I don't want to get too comfortable. I've had loaners and I've had the tendency to be engaged with autopilot and be like, oh, I'll just check this one thing, or oh, I'll just respond to this one person.
Right.
And I fear that I too may end up just like some of these other people where, you feel like you have to respond to something because you have a little bit of help from the car, but in some cases, maybe the car is not equipped to handle every scenario when you're driving and you're looking down at your phone.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a slippery slope. So I would be in the same boat with you. Like I would just rather just like drive myself instead of doing this weird hybrid. but
Right.
but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we have covered a lot of really great topics. In summary, Model 3 is the path to Tesla's profitability in 2018. The 5,000 a week sounds like the magical number. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually get to well above that by the end of the year. And in fact, has Tesla commented on end of the year numbers? Like, I think they're planning on 10,000. Is that right?
They've kind of like tiptoed around it. I mean, they've said they're going to get to 5,000 a week by the end of Q2 in a month or so. So if you figure that they have a ton more reservations, like they're incentivized to scale demand. So I think they're going to not just stop at 5,000, they'll keep scaling, but how fast, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome,
So
Gali.
5,000 is the key number because that is where they've said that they can be profitable. So that's why it's the key number to watch.
Awesome. Well, you've got some really great content on your YouTube channel. I'll make sure to link that down in the video description. But where else can people find you? You're pretty active on social. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So YouTube, HyperChange TV. We have a Twitter at HyperChange TV. You can follow me on Twitter. I tweet a lot about random Tesla theories at GFilche, GFILCHE. And yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Gali, thanks again for jumping on. Really, really great conversation and good to get to know you a little bit more. Looking forward to, keeping in touch over the long term as things progress. Congrats on the recent exposure to HyperChange, and we'll see you maybe on a future video.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Congrats on the hypermiling
Yeah.
record. That is awesome. So
thank you. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Gali. We'll talk soon.
See ya.